Hi all, welcome to Cyber Warfare Labs AWS Cloud Red Team course. In this module, we will discuss about how we can enumerate buckets object in AWS S3 account. So let's get started. So you can see here, I already configured my AWS CLI and we are going to enumerate all the buckets and objects there in AWS account. So first, what we are going to enumerate is we are going to enumerate buckets. How many buckets are there in this particular account, irrespective of the region. So you can also specify the region, but if you don't specify any region, it will give you all the buckets which is there in AWS account. But one thing you should be noted that you need at least list and get permissions to enumerate these information on S3. So if you have a list and get permission on S3 resources, you can enumerate list of buckets as well as you can get the information about the objects there in this particular buckets. So let's get started. So first, what we are going to enumerate, we are going to enumerate all the buckets there in AWS account. So this is the command. We are using S3 API module here. So AWS S3 API list buckets. So it will give the information about all the buckets there in this particular account. You can see here in this account, we have 3 buckets, irrespective of the region. So maybe this bucket will be part of one region and another bucket will be part of other regions. So, but here you can see all the buckets in this particular AWS account. This is the owner who created this bucket. So there may be a possibility that there may be a different owner who created these buckets. So you can see here we have 3 buckets there in this particular account. Then what next? So once we have information about the bucket, we are going to enumerate about the access policies. So how we can restrict or how we can assign the access to the users, roles as well as groups. So you already know that there is 2 types of policy. One is identity-based policy and second one is the resource-based policy. Identity-based policy you can enumerate using IAM users, groups and roles and the policy or permission attached to all these things. So you can enumerate all the information there in IAM, basically identity-based policy. But when we are going to enumerate a resource-based policy, we know that there is 2 types of policy. One is ACL and second one is bucket policy. So ACL will be defined by the bucket level as well as object level, and bucket policy will be only attached to a bucket level. So what we are going to enumerate, we are going to enumerate a resource-based policy, because identity-based policy we already discussed in our IAM how we can enumerate the identity-based policy or the policy which is attached to a user's group or role. Either it's a managed policy or inline policy that we already discussed in our IAM section. So let's explore about resource-based policy which is attached to this bucket as well as objects. So initially we are going to explore about the bucket. So let's take a look. So second thing what we are going to enumerate is the ACL which is applied on the bucket level. So this is the command which will give you the information about access control list which is there in this particular bucket. So you have to specify the bucket name here. So just copy this one. Open a new tab, paste it here. Now you have to specify, let's copy this bucket name here. That's it. So it will give you the information about list of ACL or ACL which is applied on the specified bucket. So you can see here what we are going to check. We are going to check what are the ACL which is applied on this AWS Red Team bucket. So this is the bucket name. You can see here this is the owner ID, who's the owner who created this bucket, who are managing this bucket, and there is a grants. So grantee, this is the ID which is similar to your user ID. This is the also grantee, this is also grantee, this is also grantee. So that means these are the 4 grantee, which means the owner of this bucket, he can, or this owner can read the bucket permission, the buckets, writes the bucket, When you're talking about read the bucket, that means he can list it down all the objects there in the bucket. When we're talking about write, that means this owner can put or put the objects in this particular bucket. These are the two. That is the read ACP. ACP means access control policy. So this owner can read access control policy or ACL, which is applied to this bucket, as well as this owner can write. That means owner can change, owner can modify the access control policy of this bucket. So these are the 4 rights which belongs to this owner, because grantee ID you can see as the similar to the owner ID. What next? So there is one grantee ID, and you can see the URI is mentioned that all the users. So that means it's a public. When you can see that all the users, that means it's public. What public can they can access the read. So they can only read read means they can only view the list of objects there in this particular bucket. They cannot see the content of this object, because this policy is only applied on the bucket level. And bucket level, if there is a read, that means they can list it down all the objects, but they cannot see, or public cannot see, the access control policy, because there is only read permission here. There is no read ACP permission here for all the users. And you can also see this authenticated user group. So suppose you have any other AWS account, that means you are authenticated group. What you can see, or if there is any user who is a part of same account, what they can do, they can read the access control policy of this particular bucket. So similarly, you can understand about how the bucket they configured, what actions they can do and what they cannot do, and if it's publicly accessible or not, what public can do. So this is the ACL which is applied on the bucket level. So you can manage the bucket thing from this ACL. What next? Next, we know that there is 2 types of resource-based policy. One is bucket ACL and second one is bucket policy. Bucket ACL can be, can be attached to a bucket level as well as object level, but bucket policies only be specific to bucket. We already discussed what is bucket policy and what is the difference between ACL and bucket policy and why it's important. So let's check if there are any policy which is applied to this bucket. So I just copy this one, open a new tab, paste it here. Now you have to specify the bucket name. Let's see. I copy this bucket only, name only, and paste it here. So you can see this is the policy which is attached to this particular bucket. That's why we called a resource-based policy. So you can say the statement is this is okay. So it is this one, effect, allow. So what it does, its policy allow this principal name star. When we say star, that means public. If there is no star, or we can also define the ARN of users, ARN of role, ARN of group, or ARN of anything, but here I specify star, that means public. Action, what they can do, listed down get object. They can get the object, that means they can view the content of the object as well as they can get the object version as well as. And where they can perform all these actions, they can perform this action on all the object which is there in this AWS Red Team bucket, because after that there is a star. So they can do all the operation in this bucket on the object which is there in this bucket. They can view the object, they can view the content of the object, and they can also view the object version as well as. So this is how you can identify what is policy attached to this particular bucket. This is really important for your red team operations, because sometimes you found that there is no identity-based policy attached to any users group or roles, and there is no ACL is defined there. But if you found that there is a resource-based policy which is attached, and in resource-based policy, if you have a bucket policy which is attached and which allows some users, some groups to access it, you can edit, definitely it will help to your red team operation to exfiltrate the data or gather the credential, because bucket also store the credential. If you are using Lambda function, they store the credential and you can do this thing. So this is how you can identify the bucket policy which is applied to particular bucket. You have to specify the bucket name here. Now what next? So as we already discussed, if this is really important, get public access block. If this is the defined, your all bucket ACL and bucket policy will be inactive. That means it won't work until this is true. So let's see. Let's copy this one. Open a new tab. Paste it here. Sorry. You have to specify the bucket name here. So let's see. What is this bucket? Paste it here. So in public access block, there is a two type. One is for ACL. There is a two type. Two is for ACL and two for bucket policy. So if it's a false, that means all the ACL and resource bucket policy will be applicable. If it's a true, that means it will block all the public access, even if you define in your resource based policy, even you define on your ACL as well as bucket policy. So this is really important, because if it's a block, if it's a true here, in all the cases your ACL as well as bucket policy won't work for a public accessibility. So this is really important to understand. So we discuss about how we can enumerate the buckets, how we can enumerate the resource based policy, either ACL or bucket policy which is attached to this bucket, as well as the block public access block. So if it's a block or not. If it's a block, that means it won't effective your ACL as well as bucket policy. But if it's not block, it will be really effective, or it will be work to exfiltrate the data. So these are the things you should be enumerate before doing any red team operations. So that these are things which is applicable for the bucket level. Let's see what will be applicable for the object level. So this is the command which will give you all the object within a bucket. So let's copy this one, list it down all the object in a specified bucket. Let's copy this one, open a new tab, paste it here. Here you have to specify the bucket name. So I just copy this bucket. That's it. So you can see these are the objects there in this bucket, and key is uniquely identified of each and every object. So this is the key, AWS tag. This is the object, when it's created, what is the size, who's the owner of this object. This is the second, this is the folder, you can see, because that's why it's say 0 size. This is the third one, and this is the fourth one. So it will list it down all the objects there in the specified bucket. So this is all. Now what next? Next thing we are going to enumerate is resource based policy. When we're talking about the bucket level, we have ACL as well as bucket policy. But when we're talking about objects, there is only one policy, that's called ACL. Access control list can be, and it's only applicable for the bucket as well as objects. So let's see if there are any ACL for this particular objects. So it's applicable for the object level as well. So this will give the information about the ACL on the specified object. Let's see what object, what policy, what ACL is attached to this particular object. Let's copy this one, paste it here. You have to specify the key. Key is uniquely identified, so this is the key. You can see there is a two text, AWS text as well as this is also there, but this is inside the folder. This is there in the root directory or root bucket, but both have different key, because key is the one that we can uniquely identify. Let's see, let's paste it. Sorry, let's paste the key here. So this is the key, that means the object name. Okay, now you have to specify the bucket name as well. So this is the bucket name. It will give the information about ACL which is there. So you can see a similar, like we have a bucket, ACL applied on the bucket, we have ACL applied on that this particular objects. So grantee, this is a grantee, that means this is the owner who can read, that means who can view the content. When we're talking about the bucket, they can list it down all the objects. When we're talking about the object, read means they can view the content, they can write the content, they can read the access control policy applied on this object, and they can write the access control policy. This is for the owner of this bucket. So the grantee, you can see these are the grantee. What about the public, all users? It's a read. That means for all the users, for publicly, it's read permissions have. So everybody can read this thing, but nobody can, read the ACL or access control policy, ACP of this particular object. So this is how you can identify what is the policy permission attached to the object level. So I think this is enough to understand about what information you can get, what is the thing you can enumerate. There's a lot more things, but you should understand about the resource-based policy, how the policy is attached, and who can access it. So once you have enough information, you can perform your red team data exfiltration or credential access phase to grab the credential or retrieve the credential, as well as exfiltrate the sensitive data which is there inside the bucket. So I think that's all for this video. Thank you so much.